All right, let's tackle one of the most famous and frankly life-changing phrases in all of philosophy. This is one of those ideas that, once you really get it, can totally shift how you look at yourself and your place in the entire universe.
So here it is, in the original French from Jean-Paul Sartre. It sounds pretty cool, right? L'existence précède l'essence. But what on earth does that actually mean? Well, it's way more than just a clever saying. This was a complete revolution in thought.
At its core, it all boils down to this one huge question. For centuries, pretty much everyone, philosophers, theologians, had the same answer. And then existentialism came along and just flipped the whole table over. So which is it? Is your story already written for you? Or are you the one holding the pen with a blank page? To really get why this was such a bombshell, you've got to understand what it was up against. For most of history, the exact opposite of what Sartre was saying was the exact opposite of what Sartre's was saying. It was a deeply ingrained idea about how everything, including us, works.
So look at this. It's a straight-up flip. The traditional view, essence precedes existence, basically means the blueprint for you, your purpose, your soul, your whatness, exists before you're even born. Existentialism says, nope, wrong way around. You just show up. You exist, thrown into the world with no predefined nature. Your essence, who you really are, is something you have to build along the way.
I know this can all still feel a little bit abstract and philosophical. So let's use a super simple analogy to lock it down. Think about the difference between having a detailed blueprint versus starting with a completely blank canvas. A house is a perfect example of that old way of thinking. The architect draws up a blueprint, that's its essence, its purpose, way before a single brick is laid. Its existence just serves that pre-planned essence. But for an existentialist, a human is the total opposite. You're just born, you exist, and then, through all your choices and your actions, you start to draw your own blueprint. You decide your own purpose. And Sartre himself said it perfectly. I love that phrase, surges up in the world. It's not gentle. It's like you just burst onto the scene with no instruction manual. You arrive, you look around, and then the lifelong job of defining yourself begins. So let's think about this. If there's no blueprint, no grand plan, no built-in human nature telling you what to do, what are you left with? Well, this leads us to the first and maybe the most staggering consequence of this whole idea. This is what they call radical freedom. And we're not just talking about the freedom to choose what to have for breakfast. This is the profound and kind of terrifying freedom to define your own values, your own meaning, your own identity, completely from scratch. No one else is responsible for it. It's all on you. And check out the words Sartre uses here, condemned. That doesn't exactly sound like a party, does it? He saw this freedom as a burden. You are stuck with it. You can't escape it. You can't just say, oh, it's my nature, or I was told to do it. Nope. The responsibility is entirely yours, like it or not. And that radical freedom has a heavy flip side, because if you are totally free to choose what you do, then you are totally responsible for who you become. The logic here is pretty ironclad. You do something. That action becomes a little piece of your definition, and you are the only one responsible for that definition. There is no one else to blame and no one else to credit either. So a person isn't cruel because they were born with some kind of cruel essence. They are defined as a cruel person because they choose to do cruel things. But here's the hopeful part. Because it's all about choice, you are always free to choose differently. You could start defining yourself as a kind person tomorrow, just by acting kindly. Your character isn't a fixed thing. It's just the running total of your actions. Okay, this brings us to the third big consequence. And this is where things can feel a little bleak. If we're born without a purpose, into a universe that doesn't have one either, that puts us in a really strange and difficult position. Here's the fundamental problem. We, humans, we're meaning-seeking machines. We're wired to look for purpose and significance in everything. But we're looking for it in a universe that is completely silent and indifferent. So what happens when that deep human need crashes head-on into a cold, uncaring reality? Well, that collision has a name, the absurd. Now, it's not that the universe is absurd or that our search for meaning is absurd. The absurd is the tension, the gap between the two. It's like shouting a question into a canyon and only ever hearing the echo of your own voice.
And another famous thinker, Albert Camus, took this idea to its logical and very stark conclusion. He said that once you truly face the absurd, the first question you have to ask is, why bother going on? And his answer was a powerful yes. You go on by rebelling, by creating your own meaning in spite of the universe's silence. Now, as compelling as all this is, it's not without its critics. The idea of absolute radical freedom, well, it can feel a little too simple when you crash it against the messy reality of everyday life. For example, Simone de Beauvoir, who was a close contemporary of Sartre, added a brilliant nuance. She agreed we're free, but she talked about sedimentation. The idea is that our past choices, our culture, our circumstances, they all build up over time, like layers of sediment. They don't take away our freedom, but they create inertia, a drag that makes change harder. You're free, but you might have to push against a current you yourself created. And another philosopher, Martin Heidegger, had an even deeper criticism. He basically suggested that Sartre didn't create something new. He just took the old formula and flipped it upside down. Heidegger argued that Sartre was still playing the same old philosophical game instead of questioning the very meaning of words like existence and essence to begin with. So, after all that, what are the key takeaways? First, you show up first, and your purpose comes later. Second, you define who you are through what you do. Third, this gives you incredible freedom. Fourth, it also gives you total responsibility. And finally, in a world that won't give you meaning, it becomes your job to create it. Which leaves us with a final question. And this one isn't just an abstract thought experiment. It's a direct challenge to you. If you are defined, moment by moment, only by what you do, who are you choosing to become right now?